Hello, everyone. Today I'll be speaking with Ibrahim Abuzid. Ibrahim is a software developer here in Austin, Texas, at a large, well-known firm that will remain unnamed for his privacy. And I thought he'd be a great first guest because he's a good friend of mine. He's an all-around interesting, insightful, thoughtful guy, and I think that his experiences are widely applicable. Our conversation will be centered around his career and experience in software development, and I hope that you all find this conversation as insightful as I did. Ibrahim, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
I'd like to know, why did you get into computer science and software development?
That is a very good question.
Cut right to the chase.
Okay.
The big why, I want to start with the big why questions first, because I think it's important to get at the motives before the practical stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start with, I guess when I first went into college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I figured that I go the pre-med route, one, because I had a lot of friends who were doing that. My dad's a doctor. And I figured I'd had like the test scores and aptitude for it. So I was like, this is a solid, prestigious career. Let me go for it. So 3 weeks into Bio 1, I was like, dude, fuck this. This Krebs cycle is so boring. Did not like it at all. Could not stay awake through my bio class. I was like, okay, and like on top of it, I didn't really, felt quite discouraging to be going down a route that I wasn't like into. So I decided I needed to look into different career paths, figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And I think what I did was I just pulled up like careers with high salaries and kind of just went down the list. Like, okay, which of these could I see myself getting into? Yeah. And I think a few thoughts there, like one, like money's great, of course, but also like typically a compensation will reflect like how demanding a career is, or, just supply and demand. You can find out what is something that you can feel proud of accomplishing.
So it sounds like you found yourself in a rut where you were having doubts, but after that, you just kind of picked a criteria. So like, where can I make a decent living?
I needed a list to source from. Yeah. Something that can guide me. Like, okay, there's a bazillion things I can do for money. I'm going to need to start somewhere. So let me narrow it down.
So why not? Because there's a lot of things you can make a decent living at. There's, especially that are different from the medical route. There's finance, there's law school. What was it about computer science and being a software developer that attracted you? Was it because it was particularly futuristic, or, was there anything?
I think it was, I was looking into a few different careers. Law was one of them, as well as computer science, and then just engineering in general, and business. And as I was reading into what each one was like, I can't quite remember what like made me gravitate to computer science, but I do know that once I felt like, hey, I could really see myself doing this. Like, this looks like a really cool thing. Before officially switching my majors, I decided like, I'm going to prove it to myself that this is something that I want to do. I'm not going to kind of repeat the past mistake of, just picking a major and seeing if it fits, and then after the fact, trying to figure out if it's the right thing. I took an online programming course. And
which one was that?
It was the Python course on Code Academy. And it's a great course, and I still recommend people start with it. And Python is a great programming language for newcomers. I went through that course and I loved it. I was like, dude, in all of my lectures, because I was still going to like the Chem 1 and Bio 1, and I'm sitting next to my friends, and I just have Code Academy pulled up, and I'm like writing for loops.
Already checked out.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, what's the clicker? Okay, A, boom. And then, I'm back into it. And it was like I was like, dude, this is so fun. Like, it doesn't make sense for work to be this fun, right? Like this, if this is what people do for a living, this is unreal. Like, this is great. I have to do this. So I think it was just how it was so stimulating, lots of problem solving. It felt like going through a puzzle. It was just so engaging. And it's something that I'm like, dude, even if I don't switch my major to computer science, I could see myself finishing this course and doing other courses like it. And so I think it just clicked with me right then and there. And who knows, maybe other careers would be like just as fun, like if I were to go into law or business. But I can't try out those careers from like some online course in the way that I can kind of get a taste of it that I could with programming.
if I can sum it up, I think one of the big attractive points about computer science and software development is accessibility. I've tried my hand at coding too, and I've always envied people that do it for a living because it can so easily be turned into a hobby. And it's the thought of being able to go and do something at work that is also doable outside, with just a laptop, and you have access to all these crazy technologies. And really the documentation is there. It's all there for you to access. It's something that is definitely a first. You won't find that in medicine. You can't just can't just do your own medicine.
I can't be a civil engineer, just erect a building, build a new bridge for fun.
I think computer science is definitely unique in that aspect. Now, why should someone not go into computer science? So we've listed a pretty good pro. It's lucrative, it's accessible, it's hip, it's prestigious at the moment. Why not?
Okay. Yeah, this is a really tough question. Partly because I also just love it so much. I don't know how you could not like it. But so there are aspects of my job that might not be a good fit for some people. One, I think if you are fiercely independent, you want to be in control of every aspect of your success, I think that working on a team and having to communicate with different departments in the typical software engineering environment is something that you need to be comfortable with. There's a lot of unknowns in the field, so you have to be very comfortable always being on the cusp of your knowledge, where sometimes in order to figure out the answer of the next steps, you need to actually improve as a programmer in order to figure that out. And sometimes that gap might be a little frustrating.
It's a trope. I feel like I've heard that the industry is just so fast.
Yeah, there's a new JavaScript framework out every week. Yeah. So that's definitely a trope. Yeah, I guess it's if you want to have a very predictable job, one where you're I know my duties, and once I figured it out, I know that I figured it out, and I can just keep on doing what I figured out and what I'm good at. That's not really going to exist in software.
That's pretty key. So you got to be able to keep up, and you got to be able to work in a team. So you're working with other people, building things fast, and that's what makes it tough. That's why some people may not find that an enjoyable environment.
I will reframe it slightly in saying that it's not that you have to keep up, but you need to be comfortable with the sensation of, I don't know how this is done, right? So there are work environments that are pretty well paced. They're not it's not a stressful job, but you might be spending 70% of your time on the job feeling I just don't even know how to do this. Right. And then eventually you piece it together, and you do build up this sort of confidence as you build up this track record of being able to accomplish these tasks.
What kind of preconceived notions did you have about software development? You were talking about things you do internally. I think a lot of people, myself included, we always think about engineers that work on consumer-facing products, right? We think about people that are designing the next big thing at Google that'll be in your pocket, or Apple. But there's a lot of software engineering and development that goes on to improve internal processes, like you were just describing.
Yeah.
So I guess, could you speak to that? Is that different than you thought it would be? What else is different about the reality of the job that you thought would be otherwise? Yeah.
So specifically, what are the, for your first point of what are the things that someone can work on? Yeah, there's a lot of different things. There's, you can program for consumers. You can program for other businesses. There's software written for other, there's the people who write the actual programming language that you use, right? So that's very far back the chain of I'm writing code for other developers to use. I wouldn't really say that that's something that I gave too much thought about when I was thinking about the industry. A big thing that sticks out to a lot of people when they come in is how much of the day you spend coding. Just 2 months ago, I was being shadowed by a group of freshmen who my company just wanted to
cool.
See the life of a software engineer. I asked them how much of my day do you think I spend programming? I'm at work 8 hours a day. How much of that do you think is writing code? Yeah. The lowest guess I got was 6 hours. And I was like, dude, if I programmed 6 hours a day, my brain would be fried. Whew, no, you will not. Like, if you can get in 3 hours of programming in a day, that is phenomenal. Like, if you even have that chunk of time in your schedule. So that's a big thing, is like how much of the job is not programming. That was something that definitely stood out to me. I'll say before even thinking about the career stuff, when I was thinking about switching majors, I definitely had this idea that like all good programmers are people who started when they were like 13 or 14. Something you start very young, which I found to not be at all the case. Of like, there's tons of my peers who just started in college.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And to touch on that a little more, I would fall to the side of that if you started young, it would be like an extraordinary advantage. Like,
Oh, yeah. Let me clarify. I think so. If you did start young, yes, you'll be ahead of the curve. What I meant instead was rather that I've not found it to be the case that many programmers started when they were young. I think a very, very like the vast majority started college onwards.
Of those people that I guess you're describing that started late, what is there a defining quality that they have, or like something that propels them to get into software development, or that allows them to succeed so late in life? Like, it sounds like you need a certain amount of self-efficacy.
Yeah.
You need a certain amount of self-belief, to get over like the idea that maybe I'm not too late, which of course you're not. If you're in college, you're still young.
Yeah.
But I think that affects a lot of people. So yeah, I know. Could you touch on who those people are and what patterns you might see in those people?
So I guess what I want to challenge is the idea that like they are overcoming that feeling of being too late, because they aren't too late. And that's the whole point. I think that just in pop culture, there's the idea of that like prodigy programmer who's been coded just, writing
in
away
his sleep
code
since he was 9.
Yeah, exactly. So I think these people are just no different from people in other majors if they're pursuing law or engineering or what have you. I think it's just the same kind of people, and I think like software engineering is just another field, just like those fields, and so you don't need to be a superstar to succeed in it.
And we started touching on the practical side. I want to go ahead and shift over there. So you were talking about your day, that not a lot of it is actually writing code.
Yeah.
So what exactly is the rest of the day? Could you break it down in like time percentages for us if you had to? Think of it like a pie chart, and it has slices. How would you categorize those slices?
I think all my different duties take about just about the same amount of time. And if I can go into those, like generally speaking, my day-to-day things are like fall into 3 categories. One is this, like figuring out what code needs to be written. 2 is actually writing the code. And then 3 is validating that code works as you expect it to. So yeah, that first one will be like that research phase of, hey, product has given us, this description of this criteria of what we need to deliver to the customer. We need to figure out what it's going to take, what kind of engineering efforts we need to do that. And so someone will have to go out and research that and plot down like these are the different steps that it'll take in all the different services that we have. Then that second thing of writing the code, this is what most people are familiar with, and most people who are studying CS right now, that's what the people think is like the entirety of the job.
The romanticized portion.
Yeah. It's great. It's super fun. I love it. And but it's just like one of the 3 segments of those broad categories. And then the last one is validating the code works. So this is like before, like when I'm done writing my code, someone has to look over it to make sure that it looks right, give different suggestions of how it could be implemented differently. And that's just for analyzing how the code was written. And then once that's approved and it's like put on a server somewhere, then we have someone go in and test it. Or like, okay, we know this code looks good, but does it perform the way we expect it to? So someone will have to go in, poke at it, make sure that it holds up. So those are like the 3 broad categories of what I do. And you can imagine that there's a day where my work has already been laid out for me. Like, this is what you need to program. And, luckily for you, you don't have meetings that day. And so you can just like sit down and crank through. Other days, my code's already checked in. I need someone to look over it, make sure it gets the okay. I also have one of my teammates who his code's been deployed, and so he needs someone to do quality assurance on it, make sure that it works all right. And at the same time, someone else is researching something for a future code that we have to write, and so they're going to have a design meeting where we review the design. So I'm split. I might be split across a few different things that day, whereas one day it just happens that like coincidentally most of the team is heads down on some of the programming they have.
So shifting gears to a little bit about your background and what it took to get a software development position right out of school. Now, what did you have to do? What hurdles did you jump through to get here? What did you do that maybe wasn't necessary? I guess for anybody listening, I think they're keen on hearing what exactly you did. You know,
get a job.
How hard did you work to get a job? Yeah, I mean, Austin,
Yeah.
there's a lot of tech jobs in Austin, but I think it's actually an extremely competitive job market too. I mean, everybody's coming here.
Yeah.
So got any knowledge you could drop there?
I think what's generally looked for in the recruiting process, at least for grads, is internship experience, having that like social proof of, hey, this person was trusted with a job and like they actually, you know, coded something that that made it out there to produce revenue. I had an internship and oh my God, it was a super tiny startup. It was like, yeah, it was very small. It was me and two other engineers.
That's probably a good experience though. I mean, it sounds like if you had only two people, you had a lot of responsibility. Is that right or wrong?
Yeah. So I definitely, I was treated like a full timer. There's pros and cons to that. So one, and like I really get to, I'm not given like a, hey, here's a side project that's never going to see the light of day. Go work on it. I'm not given that, but also I needed a lot of mentoring that the other engineers just didn't have the time to provide. But yeah, having internship experience is a big one. Just having strong interviewing skills, both on the technical side and I think on the soft skills side, because I do feel like that's what won me over at my company.
The soft skill side.
I think so. I'm not that spectacular in terms of like I'm not bad at the like technical interviewing, but I'm also not great. Especially going at UT at such a big CS school. I'm probably just like right down the middle in terms of like technical aptitude.
Okay. You mentioned the right fit. I'm not sure that's been talked about a lot in terms of a lot of people are just like, do you have the knowledge to get any offer? You know, and so there's a lot of focus on like lead code and all these other boot camp type things to gain the project experience. But I don't often hear people talk about your actual fit and how that might be a big determinant in getting a job. So I guess, could you elaborate on what exactly it is about that turned out to be pretty good and that gave you that edge?
There are a few things. This is like pretty small, but I think it might have been a contributor, which is just the fact that they were in Austin. And I want it to be in Austin, right? If they have a panel of a few different people and they're like, oh, you know, this guy, he really wants to be in Seattle. We don't even have a Seattle office. Like they're going to invest their time where they think a payoff is going to happen. But to get into more things that are like in your control, I saw that they were quite a collaborative environment rather than a competitive one. And I think I don't think either of those is necessarily better than the other. It just suits different kinds of people. And so for me, I was very much into wanting to be part of a team and feeling like everyone's pushing each other up. I also, the office had a weekly tech talk. So every Friday at the end of the day, someone would give a tech talk, and it didn't always have to be about a technical topic. So if someone was like really into baking, they could give a talk about that. And it's a team building exercise as well as just a way of like fostering like learning among each other. So I really like that. I like that I could be somewhere that is going to teach me best practices in the industry and really pull me up. I think different people take this differently, and I don't know what impact this might have had.
Okay.
But I think one thing that I did differently than others, and again, I don't know if it's to my, if it served me or was to my detriment, was that a very common question in interviews is like, what do you want to be working on? What kind of tech stack do you want to be working on? In terms of like what technology specifically. So like, do you like to program in Java? Do you like to do JavaScript? Do you want to do front end? Do you want to do back end? Some kind of fit of like, what is like the digital ecosystem that you're going to be working in?
Yeah.
For me, I honestly did not know. Like, I was like, I have to work in these things to know. Yeah. It's like going to a buffet of a cuisine that you've never had and being like, hey, what's the dish you like really you're hoping is there?
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've never had that stuff. But obviously, if I just like if they ask me like, hey, what tech stack do you want to work on? I'd be like, I don't know, and like that was it. It's not a good answer. But what I followed that up with, and this is honestly how I felt, was like, who cares? Like, does it really matter what tech stack I'm working on? And like, what I care a lot more about is that I'm happy going to work, and I don't really think the tech stack's going to be like the make or break it thing. Like, I want to go to work, be excited to see my coworkers, being like, "Hey team, like we're rocking this sprint. Like let's keep on let's keep on chugging." And yeah, I'm just excited about what I do, and I'm in an environment where I'm learning more about whatever it is that I do happen to be working on. So even if it's some kind of obscure tech stack that other people don't really like, if I become incredible at it because I like going to work rather than working at a, amazing super hip tech stack, but I dread seeing my coworkers, right? Then like how good am I going to get at that?
Yeah.
So that was my vantage point. That's just what I told my recruiters, like, hey, like what's a lot more important to me is the environment that I'm in. And I see that this company has the things that I'm looking for.
So going back to your internship experience, can you speak a little bit about what working at that small company was like? And maybe, did you have any other internships, or was it
just the one?
Okay. Since it sounds like the extreme smaller end, can you elaborate on what that was like versus working at, what are the extreme differences between a corporation and a startup?
Okay. So startup is very much, you need to get this out the door. Like, just strap it up, and like, I don't care if the code looks like spaghetti, just like, we need this out here. Okay. So to give some context, I was with two other engineers. We were working out of a startup house. There were like the business guys in the other room who were on sales calls. And so that's what that environment looked like. Yeah. So I was told like, hey, you need to like, add this feature, go do it. I was like, okay. And I work on it a bit. I'm like, I'm kind of stuck. I need help. And the other engineers, like, they're good-hearted people. They want to help me out, but they're like, they also have their own stuff that they need to do. And, the business guys are promising, hey, this is going to be ready before the start of the school year. And, they have their own deadlines of when they need to ship out their stuff. So they didn't really have the room to be able to mentor me through a few of the things that I was working on. I was given tons of autonomy, but I think it was autonomy too early, right? Especially this was after my sophomore year.
Autonomy too early in what way? Like, do you mean from a design development standpoint, or just like a general responsible human being standpoint?
Kind of everything. Yeah. It's just like, I think from the coding, right? So yeah, the like, hey, this is a feature that you're working on, go do it. Whereas at a larger company, one, you have a lot more peers, so there's a lot of people who can like bear the burden of having to onboard you. And they expect it too. They expect that, like, on your first, say, 6 months on the job for a new grad, you're going to be, you are probably going to lower the output of the team while you're there rather than raise it. And it's just an investment that they have to make. There's a lot more processes in place. So like those 3 phases that I mentioned earlier, the distinct phases, that's not a thing in in the startup environment. At least at the one that I... Yeah, much more like, hey, I got this feature and let me push it into the code base. And at the time, we weren't the product wasn't live. We were like making a product that was eventually going to be released. So there was a lot of like, hey, let me test this code on my computer. It works on my machine. Let me put it in the code base. Yeah, there's just a lot more processes.
Bureaucracy,
but also not like meaningless. Or at my job, it's not like meaningless bureaucracy. It's like things that are in place because this is what we need to do to make sure that we have a good quality product.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary for scale. I mean, it's
exactly.
absolutely necessary for scale.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned that y'all were all in this startup house, and you had the sales guys next to you. Cross department experience. So obviously you weren't picking up the phones and doing that kind of stuff, but did the cohesive nature and not being siloed like you would be, like I suspect that you don't communicate with the sales department that much, right? At my company, we have 100 people, and we still have a good bit of cross department communication, and we see each other all the time. Not right now, of course, but we used to. Was that valuable in any way? I suspect this won't be a very long answer, I guess, but was that cross department experience in the startup valuable at all?
It did have value. It wasn't a ton of value, but there was some. I think it was just one. It was cool, just like seeing the guys doing their calls. Yeah. I'd say like the insights that I could pull from it was, I guess, hearing all the salesmanship that was going on. That was pretty neat of how the product was being pitched, and I think constantly overhearing these calls motivated me to work on the product as well. I'm like, I understand what it is that I'm making. What engineering teams might be susceptible to is they don't have a knowledge of what the actual customer deliverable is. And so they're told like, hey, we need this. And maybe somewhere along the communication chain, there's a mismatch between what the customer is expecting and wants and what the engineers make. I think being 15 feet away from someone telling the customer this is what we're making really put that helped me picture what exactly the customer was going to receive. So that was very valuable. I think just recognizing that there has to be this other department, right? I can't just make a stellar product that's going to sell itself. Like there's going to have to be people behind that. And I think lastly, this has to do more with the startup environment of just just being able to witness it. So like witnessing what it's like for these people to like quit their day jobs and really go all in on this. This is not much to do with it being a cross-department thing, but just being able to witness the place as a whole.
So segueing from the practical, have you ever taken a Big Five personality test?
Yes.
Could you run us through, not exact percentages or anything, but your traits and maybe how they align with your interests? I think a lot of people are interested in the Big Five, and you can read a lot of advice about where that might point you. Oh, if you're high in openness, maybe you should think about one that allows you to be creative. Avoid managerial work if you're high in openness, for instance. But hearing it from you and how it applies to your day-to-day and your profession, I think might help.
Yeah. I can describe how I perceive my job because of where I rank on the Big Five. I don't know that... this is me thinking out loud. I don't know if there's any like Big Five configuration that would really disqualify you from software. It just might change what you like about software. So
that's interesting.
Okay, agreeableness, I'm like 60 something percentile, something like that, which is not that high on average, but apparently very high for men. So
but 50%, so above 50% is more agreeable.
Yeah.
Just make sure we have the
So this might be why I like a more collaborative environment versus a more competitive one. I have historically ranked quite low on conscientiousness, but I think that's something that's shifted over time. And I think also it's something where my self-perception is different than how people perceive me. I have my friend be like, dude, bullshit, you're so conscientious. But I personally don't feel that conscientious, but it's something that's gone up over time. So I think I originally, like when I took it 3-4 years ago, I was like 30 something percentile. I'd say now I'm much higher, like 60, 70, something like that. For my self-perception. I think like conscientiousness is just going to be something that generally helps you in your career. Like you want to be more conscientious rather than less. There's something that's thrown around in the software industry in that like laziness is like is a virtue among programmers, and that's what. But it's using laziness in a different way, and not that like you don't want to work, but you find things that you just really hate doing, so you just write software to automate it. Like so, just to keep from having to put up with it.
Path of least resistance.
Yeah, being like, dude, I hate typing this thing into my URL every time.
But that's distinct from conscientiousness.
Exactly.
Conscientiousness is like your grit. Being able to stick to something, and see it through.
Then there's Neuroticism, I'm incredibly low, like third, fourth percentile.
I mean, do you how I think that that's significant?
Mhm.
Once again, this isn't specific to computer science, but rather just for resilience and in general and success in general.
Mhm.
Do you think your conscientiousness? So to touch on that, you said that it's changed over time. Was that a conscious change
Yeah.
on your part? So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
thought you identified maybe I could use a little kick in the butt
Uh-huh.
on my conscientiousness. What do you have any tips there that might help people?
To make you more conscientious.
Yeah,
I
because it can
think,
be easy.
yeah.
It can be kind of discouraging to be like, "How do you be more conscientious?" You just be more conscientious.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I think just lowering your expectations dramatically and being like, what is the smallest change that I can make that would actually, like, it is an improvement. Like, what is the smallest change that I can make that would make me, like, would make me happier? That, like, it does register on the map of, like, this is progress.
Small steps.
Yeah, so small steps and being okay with it and recognizing that over the long haul, like if you're on this mission for 20, 30 years, it's going to be a dramatic transformation then. Let's see, what other traits are there? There's extroversion.
Yeah.
I think I'm higher on extroversion. And the way that plays out in my job is that I just, like I said earlier, it's very important for me who I work with. So that's a big thing. I would like to be in an office if possible. Like working from home is not ideal for me.
Yeah.
And I guess some of the things that it has affected in my work is since we shifted to work from home, I've been trying to put on different activities to like help foster the team environment. So things like organizing team lunches, having like a game night, doing like these daily icebreakers, things like that. Last thing is openness. I'm also like 90+ percentile on that.
Surely that helps.
I think so. I think one thing that my manager has praised me on is being able to being very, very curious. Like she says I ask a lot more questions than I guess people of my level do, and that and they're very like specific questions, not like how does this work, but hey, I noticed that like we're using this thing to get the job done. Like why is it that we went for that rather than this other thing? So I think being very, very curious about my work helps there. And then sometimes you just need to think outside the box it's very easy to get like a tunnel vision on a very specific solution, and what you need is a different perspective. So I think openness could help there.
Do you think that is a malleable quality, characteristic?
I don't know because it's not I feel like it's one like where if you care, I feel like people who are low in openness don't care to be otherwise, and people who are high in openness don't care to be. Yeah.
I think I want to believe that if one of them is malleable, then they all are. Like just from a consistency standpoint, like if everything has like physiological roots in some respect, like if your conscientiousness is a factor of hormones. You know, we read that book. I'm sure that that book.
Dude, I'm trying to wipe it from my memory.
I'm sure that if dopamine and like serotonin play into those respects and your ability to like desire things and go get them, which is a part of conscientiousness, that is physiological. We want to believe it's malleable. So I also want to believe that openness, which also has physiological roots, I think, is also malleable, you know? Next thing, flow. Can you just touch on flow really quickly? We've like kind of hinted at it here and there when you talk about solving problems and puzzles, but just how important is it in your work?
I'd say that the standpoint that's important here for engineering is that your work is uninterrupted. So I think every job will probably run into something where like your job is either too difficult or it's boring and you're not using your skill set. But some jobs, like if you're a manager who's meeting with tons of different people, a big part of your job might be that you can jump from one thing to another very quickly. But for software engineering, I find that you really need to be able to sit down and ramp up into the work, where I just need this uninterrupted stretch of time for me to perform at my highest, where I can just really sink into what I'm doing.
Yeah, so maybe that's worth for people listening. Like, I'm sure everybody has different states of flow and what they enjoy and consider flow. Like I know my sister's told me a lot that communication and talking and riffing like this is somehow she gets a really big
Yeah,
she
lose
gets
track
into
of
flow
time.
really
Yeah.
well. Yeah, she loses track of time. Some people it could be programming and puzzles.
Mhm.
For some people it could be running. Running
Mhm.
could be a tremendous flow state. So I think it's worth like looking at where do you typically find yourself lost in time if you want to assess, how well you might do in this field
Mhm.
and in this kind of work. Is this typically where you find solace? And it might help you identify why you want to be a developer. So I wanted to put that out there for people to think about. Okay, last question. And this is more
Sure.
not necessarily political, but it is
Mhm.
philosophical in a sense. Tech is a very broad industry. There's a lot going on. It touches everything, and it will touch what it's not touching today. It will touch.
Yeah.
Are there any tech companies that you wouldn't work for out of principle? So I'm talking. I mean, I know we've had good talks
Mhm.
about social media. There's also like the NSA. Edward Snowden would say, yes, there are people that work with
Uh-huh.
technology that I wouldn't work for, i.e., the NSA.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on that? And yeah,
Huh. I guess I don't really see the fact like tech being a variable here. I guess I see this question as the same question as is there a company in general that you wouldn't work for out of principle? Because my answer to that would be if I felt like the company's presence in the world is like a considerable detriment to people.
but that's obviously a moot point in that, like, what do you mean by detriment?
like, I guess, is the world better that this company exists?
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't.
How about we take a very specific example?
Okay.
Like social media. Let's just use social
Sure.
media. Let's say that there's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they employ thousands of people
Mhm.
collectively, hundreds of thousands of people collectively. And at the end of the day, they're quite open about how they exploit our attention circuits,
Yeah.
for gain that might be at the detriment on a micro level.
Mhm.
Macro level, it's good for their business, but micro level, it could be quite damaging.
Yeah.
Would you work on a product like that?
I don't know. I think it's just I don't feel like social media is that black and white.
Okay.
I think I think if I was in charge of the machine learning algorithm to make people more addicted to the device, I probably wouldn't work on that. But I could see myself like they're like, hey, can you work on like the authentication part of the app where to keep people from getting their accounts hacked and like people going on their wall or like spreading information, or now you can log in to everything through Facebook, right? And so
Same with Google.
Yeah.
Google sign in.
yeah, so something like that. I'd be like, you know what, me doing a good job on this product would help humanity, even if it's contextualized with a gray area of like what the company does.
So
It
sounds like it's
Uh-huh.
not like the company itself wears a stigma. Like just because Twitter, Instagram might do something that might have a detriment somewhere doesn't mean that you're all of a
Yeah.
sudden blacklisting that company. Yeah, it's obviously more nuanced.
Mhm.
I'm just a simpleton. I paint things black and white.
Uh-huh.
I think that's a wrap.
All right, sweet.
It's all been almost an hour now.
Yeah.
That
Well,
was
thanks for
episode
having
one,
me
y'all.
on. All right,
Thanks
we
for
made it.
listening.
We're here.